Welcome to the 2025 Community Economic Development Notice of Funding Opportunity Pre-Application Presentation. This presentation provides prospective applicants of the Community Economic Development Program with details about the 2025 CED grant competition. We will be referring to the Community Economic Development Program as the CED program throughout this presentation. This presentation will review the 6 steps for responding to the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. The information presented mirrors the information and structure you will find in the NOFO. The 2025 CED NOFO is now available on the CED Information for Prospective Applicants webpage of the Administration for Children and Families, or ACF, website. The Office of Community Services, or OCS, wants to bring to your attention some important details. ACF requires applications to be electronically submitted via www.grants.gov. The deadline for electronic application submission is 11:59 p.m. Eastern on the due date specified in the NOFO. The deadline for receipt of paper applications is 4:30 p.m. Eastern on this date. To submit a paper application, you must obtain an exemption in advance. More details about submitting your application can be found in Step 5. Each applicant may only upload 2 electronic files, one for the project narrative and another for other attachments. All application materials must be included in these 2 files. Additional files that are loaded into grants.gov as part of the project narrative or attachments, such as resumes, evidence of site control, etc., will be removed from the competitive review file and not reviewed by the panel. The exceptions to this are the standard forms and OMB approved forms, which will not be counted as additional files. Step 3 will provide additional information about what to include in these files. Adobe Acrobat is compatible for use with grants.gov. However, we recommend using the grants.gov compatible version of Adobe Portable Document Format. Read the troubleshooting page on grants.gov for more information. Step 3 will also provide additional information on this. First, we will walk through Step 1, Review the Opportunity. This section provides you with an overview of the program and eligibility. The CED program creates quality jobs and provides wraparound services that help individuals with low incomes become economically self-sufficient. The program is based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is creating new, high-quality, permanent, full-time jobs for individuals with low incomes. The second pillar is addressing barriers to employment by providing wraparound services that focus on the needs of the individuals with low incomes hired into jobs created through CED. And the final pillar is promoting community revitalization by infusing funding into local communities to support economic development. For fiscal year 2025, $15.2 million is available to fund CED projects. The minimum award level for individual CED projects this year is $800,000. The maximum award level for individual CED projects this year is $800,000. The length of each project, also known as the project period, is 36 months for non-construction projects and 48 months for construction projects. OCS anticipates funding approximately 15 CED projects for fiscal year 2025. To receive an award, applicants must be a private, nonprofit community development corporation, or CDC. The premise is that nonprofit CDCs know their community and are poised to efficiently and effectively create new community economic development projects there. To be a qualified applicant, you must meet and demonstrate all 3 of the following conditions. First, you must be a private, nonprofit CDC with 501c3. Second, you must have articles of incorporation, or bylaws, demonstrating that your organization has a principal purpose of planning, developing, or managing of low-income housing or community economic development activities. And finally, your board of directors must have representation from the following 3 groups: community residents, business leaders, and civic leaders. Individuals, including sole proprietorships and foreign entities, are not eligible. Faith-based and community organizations that meet these requirements are also eligible to apply. The same statute applies to organizations regardless of whether they are faith-based. This program has no cost-sharing requirement. If you choose to include cost-sharing funds, it will not be considered during review. However, you will be held accountable for any funds you add, including through reporting. If you don't provide your promised amount, your award amount may be decreased or be subject to other enforcement actions. CED funds may be used for a wide variety of business startup or expansion activities, as long as the result is the creation of positions that can be filled by individuals with low income. These activities include startup capital for operating expenses, such as salaries, facilities, and equipment that will be replaced by projected earnings. Loans to identified, viable participating businesses, and equity or stock investment in identified, viable participating businesses. CED funds may also be used for providing support services to employees of the participating businesses. You can provide support services either directly or in partnership with service providers. Construction. For more information, please see the section about construction projects. Other types of business development activities that lead to measurable job creation, and travel for key project staff to attend ACF-sponsored workshops, conferences, recipient orientations. Projects are considered non-construction projects if they involve limited alteration or renovation, costing less than $250,000 to support participating business creation and/or expansion and job creation. Non-construction projects typically involve a loan or equity investment in participating businesses. The grant period for non-construction projects is 3 years. If you're applying for a 3-year non-construction project, clearly specify this in your application. Applicants proposing non-construction projects must create a minimum number of jobs using the following formula. Total amount of federal CED funds awarded divided by $27,000 equals minimum number of jobs to be created. For example, if a recipient is awarded $800,000 in CED funds, it must use that money to conduct activities that will create at least 29 jobs. $800,000 divided by $27,000 equals 29. Note: your score will not increase by proposing jobs above the minimum. Depending on the type of project you propose, you will be subject to rules related to real and intangible property. Most non-construction projects are subject to rules related to intangible property. Intangible property is property having no physical existence, such as trademarks, copyrights, patents and patent applications, loans, notes, and other debt instruments, or lease agreements, stock, and other instruments of property ownership. Read the federal requirements related to intangible property in the NOFO very carefully, as they may apply to all projects where CED funds are used for non-construction activities, like loans or equity investments. In instances where you propose to loan money or have an equity investment in a third-party participating business, you own the note on the intangible property, not the real property itself. The third-party participating business is the property owner of record. As such, the federal interest is in the debt instrument as an intangible property and not the property. The intangible property is subject to the 12-year rule set forth in the appropriations language. For ACF property-related policy and guidance, refer to the ACF website. Projects are considered construction projects if they require construction or renovation prior to job creation. Construction projects typically include commercial real estate for lease or use by small and large-scale business operations. The grant period for construction projects is 4 years. If you're applying for a 4-year construction project, clearly specify this in your application. Applicants proposing construction projects must propose to create at least a minimum number of jobs using the following formula. Total amount of federal CED funds awarded divided by $32,000 equals minimum number of jobs to be created. For example, if a recipient is awarded $800,000 in CED funds, it must use that money to conduct activities that will create at least 25 jobs. $800,000 divided by $32,000 equals 25. Note: your score will not increase by proposing jobs above the required minimum. It is important to note that short-term construction jobs associated with preparing for participating business startup or expansion are not counted when determining the number of jobs created under the CED program, as they are designed to be temporary. All environmental and historic preservation requirements must be fulfilled before award or before drawdown of funds. For more information, please see the Construction Projects subsection of the Project Types section of Step 1. Any CED project with construction activities that must be completed before jobs can be created, regardless of whether the construction is paid for with federal funds or whether the property is owned by the recipient or participating business, is subject by rules related to real property. Real property is defined as land, including land improvements, structures and appurtenances, affixed equipment thereto, but excludes movable machinery and equipment. Recipients using federal funding directly for construction, renovations, or to acquire a facility or land for the project must file a Notice of Federal Interest, or NFI. After the award is granted, an OCS program specialist works with recipients to calculate the federal share of real property. You're encouraged to read the federal requirements related to real property in this NOFO very carefully, as they apply to all projects where CED funds are used for construction activities. For ACF property-related policy and guidance, please refer to the ACF website. Next, we will discuss some additional policies and limitations. First, we will cover costs that CED grant funds may not be used for. Reimbursement of pre-award costs, subawards or pass-throughs, capitalizing loan loss reserve funds, providing loans in which repayment begins after the end of the funded project period, creating or expanding micro-enterprise business training and technical assistance centers, providing as a primary activity job training, placement of individuals into existing positions, and technical assistance, or placing individuals in jobs that existed prior to the proposed CED project. Next, indirect costs, which are costs you charge across more than one project, and cannot be easily separated by project. All indirect costs must be charged at either your approved rate or the de minimis rate. Carefully review the NOFO for more information on which method to use for calculating indirect rates. Additional policies and limitations to consider are: CED grant funds may not be used for subawards or pass-throughs. This program is subject to the salary rate limitations set in the current Appropriations Act. You may not use awarded funds to pay a salary at a higher rate than the rate for Executive Level 2. For the Executive Level 2 salary, please see guidance from the Office of Personnel Management on executive and senior level employee pay for more information. Lastly, you must use any program income you generate from awarded funds for approved project-related activities. Program income is money earned as a result of your award-supported project activities. Now, we will discuss Step 2, Get Ready to Apply, which includes getting registered for the necessary accounts and finding the application package. Your entity must have an active registration with SAM.gov. This includes having a unique entity identifier and SAM.gov registration. This process can take several weeks, so we suggest you start that process today. To register, go to SAM.gov Entity Registration and click Get Started. From the same page, you can also click on the Entity Registration checklist for the information you will need to register. You must also have an active account with Grants.gov. This requires a Login.gov registration as well. Please note that this may take several days. You can see step-by-step instructions at the Grants.gov Quick Start Guide for applicants. If you require help with either of these processes, please see the Contact and Support section of the NOFO for the appropriate contact. The application package has all the forms you need to apply. You can find it online by going to Search Grants at Grants.gov and search for the opportunity number. Then, click the Package tab. If you can't use Grants.gov to download application materials, you may request them from the Grants Management contact listed in the Contacts and Support section of the NOFO. If you're also unable to apply through Grants.gov, see details about exemptions for paper submissions in Step 5 of the NOFO. Unless you receive an exemption in writing from an ACF Grants officer, all applications must be submitted electronically. Now, we we will discuss some of the general format requirements for submitting an application for a CED grant, as discussed in Step 3, Prepare your application. You must submit and upload all required elements and supporting documentation in 2 files, the project narrative and other attachments. All submissions, inclusive of the project narrative and the other attachments, are limited to 200 pages total. Details about the items included in each file can be found in Step 3, Prepare your application. These 2 files and page limitations do not include standard forms or OMB-approved forms. An example of such a form is the SF424. These forms will be submitted separately as directed in the online system. Applications with additional files will be amended, and files will be removed from the review. In the next 2 slides, we will discuss the details of what these 2 files must include. The project narrative file must include the items on this slide. All items must be labeled, numbered, and organized clearly in the table of contents. Keep in mind, this is the narrative of your application, and it may include references to supporting documentation that may be included in the other attachments file. In such instances, provide clear references using the item name, location, and page numbers. For example, you may include a reference to the letters of support that are included in the application, and then include the actual letters in the other attachments file. The other attachments file must include the items presented on this slide. All items must be labeled, numbered, and organized clearly in the table of contents of File 1, Project Narrative. Keep in mind, all submissions, inclusive of the project narrative and other attachments, are limited to 200 pages total. You will need to complete other required forms. This slide lists forms that may be applicable and necessary to submit on grants.gov. It is very important to read Step 3, Prepare your application, very closely. All applications must be submitted electronically using www.grants.gov. If you do not have an internet connection or the computing capacity to upload large files, then you must request and obtain an exemption to submit a paper application prior to the closing date. In Step 5, Submit your application, see the section on Exemptions for Paper Submissions for more details on requesting an exemption. Keep in mind, there may be some differences in application formatting and submission requirements for paper applications, so pay close attention to those requirements in the NOFO. For this presentation, we will focus on the requirements for electronic applications. All applications, both paper and electronic, must use black 12-point font in Times New Roman, except for footnotes, which may be 10-point Times New Roman. The parts of the application that have specific spacing requirements are listed on this slide. All sections without explicit requirements in the NOFO may be single or double-spaced. Now, we will discuss how reviewers will review and score applications, as detailed in Step 4, Learn about Review and Award. As you put together your application, refer to the evaluation criteria in this section, as well as the corresponding language in Step 3. Every application received from a qualified CDC will be reviewed if it is submitted on time, and the request is not over the maximum funding level of $800,000. No more than 2 files will be provided to the panel to read and review. Once an application passes the initial screening, it will be reviewed and scored based on its responsiveness to the evaluation criteria in Step 4 of the NOFO. It will be reviewed and scored by a panel composed of non-federal community economic development professionals and other social service professionals. The application will be reviewed for content completeness. Therefore, a very important aspect of the application is the inclusion of all documentation needed to support written statements. The easiest way to certify that your organization is covering all of the bases is by submitting all of the elements in the application checklist presented in Step 5 of the NOFO. The first part of the application should be the project summary. It should be one single-spaced page in Times New Roman, 12-point font. Please place the following at the top of the abstract: project title, applicant name, address, contact phone numbers, voice, fax, cell, email address, and your organization's website address, if applicable. The project summary should include a brief description of the proposed grant project, including the needs to be addressed the proposed services, and the population groups to be served, as well as a statement indicating whether the application is for a 3-year non-construction project or a 4-year construction project. For the project narrative criteria, in the NOFO, Step 3 provides a summary of application requirements, and Step 4 provides information on how the criteria are evaluated and ranked in competition with other applications. A list of the evaluation criteria and additional bonus criteria are presented on this slide. Remember that while you know you have a great project, how the project is described and the supporting evidence in the application package is extremely important. While we ask you to be concise, you also have to provide enough information for reviewers who know community development, but who don't know your challenges or your community, are provided enough details to see the success of this project in a very short time period. We will now review the evaluation criteria. The first evaluation criterion, need for assistance, is worth 2 points. In this section, identify the problems you plan to solve. These problems could be physical, economic, social, financial, or institutional. To do so, demonstrate that the project is needed to create or expand participating businesses to support community revitalization. That the project is needed to create jobs in the community that individuals with low incomes can get and keep, and that the project is needed to create jobs that are not being created by other organizations. Additionally, provide recently published, within the past 5 years, and relevant evidence that both the unemployment rate and the poverty rate within the project's census tracts, or zip code, are equal to or greater than the state or national poverty rate. The next section, Objective and Expected Outcomes, is worth 3 points. In this section, demonstrate the objectives of the project and how the projects relate to the overall purpose of this program. Also describe how you will achieve the objectives. To do so, describe the project's goals and outcomes are aligned with the program's intent. Describe how the project will provide, directly or through partnerships, wraparound services aligned with identified needs to support individuals with low incomes who are employed by CED-created jobs. Describe the project's objectives for high-quality job creation, individual self-sufficiency, and community revitalization align with existing community economic development objectives and efforts in the local community. And you'll demonstrate how the project will successfully address the needs of individuals with low incomes through creating jobs and providing social supports within the community to be served by the project. In the Approach section, describe the project's action plan and how you will accomplish your proposed project. This section is worth 12 points. Include evidence that the overall approach to the project is clear and well conceived. To do this, provide an overview of the nature of the project that is consistent with the expectations of the program, as described in this NOFO. Demonstrate a high likelihood of success in creating or expanding participating businesses, which will, in turn, create jobs for individuals with low incomes before the end of the project period. Include a quarterly timeline with specific milestones linked to proposed outcomes, a discussion of how those milestones will be achieved, an analysis of factors that might affect the schedule, and propose strategies for dealing with them. Include evidence there is a sound and feasible plan to recruit low-income individuals for employment in at least 75% of the positions created by the project who have a need for the provided wraparound services. Include signed agreements with social service providers that demonstrate partnerships are in place to obtain referrals of individuals with low incomes for employment. Describe how confidential and sensitive information will be collected and protected. And describe a plan that demonstrates your capacity to responsibly manage the proposed federal funds and to adequately protect any federal funds awarded under the application through a financial management system. The business plan is broken down into 4 criteria. Participating business viability, 15 points. High-quality job creation, 13 points. Barrier reduction support services, 17 points. Community revitalization, 15 points. The total point value for this section is 60 points. In the participating business viability portion of the business plan, worth 15 points, describe the viability of all participating businesses of the proposed project. To do so, for each participating business, Provide a description of whether this is a business creation or business expansion, and what the participating business will use CED funds for. Provide a signed third-party agreement with participating businesses. For projects with equity or stock investments, draft copies of the equity stock investment agreement with all participating businesses are provided. For projects with loans, draft copies of the loan agreements with all participating businesses are provided. Provide an explanation of the basis for projected business earnings for all of the participating businesses, including documentation demonstrating financial feasibility or viability. Also provide an explanation of how the business creation or expansion will positively impact outcomes of individuals currently living in the community, including a description of the business's plan for recruiting and committing to hiring target employees from the immediate community. This should include a description of the business's plan to recruit and hire employees from the immediate community that demonstrates 75% have low income and identified barriers to employment, and that a majority of which need the wraparound services provided by the project. Provide recent market research and/or industry data published within the past 5 years that identifies the industry's short and long-term outlook and demonstrates that the participating businesses will be viable in terms of competition, anticipated market, customer base, and market trends. And provide evidence that the applicant and/or the participating business is in control of the site and facilities necessary for the success of the project, or that site control is conditioned only on the receipt of the grant award. In the high-quality job creation section of the business plan, worth 13 points, describe how participating businesses will create high-quality positions that will allow hired individuals to achieve self-sufficiency. To do so, include the number and type of new permanent full-time positions that will be created, and demonstrate how they will allow families to achieve self-sufficiency by providing competitive starting wages. To demonstrate this, include a table showing position title, a summary of the duties associated with the position, anticipating starting wage or salary, a projection of wage or salary growth opportunities. Also include data published within the past 5 years, illustrating that the wages to be paid by the positions being created are adequate for self-sufficiency within the geographic area in which the businesses will be located. Additionally, to demonstrate this, describe and provide evidence that the participating businesses will offer comprehensive employee benefits to those who will fill the newly created positions, including at least 3 of the benefits outlined in the NOFO, which are healthcare, retirement, paid leave, career growth opportunities, flexible and predictable work hours, opportunities for employees to be meaningfully integrated into the business, any additional benefits that contribute to the self-sufficiency of the employee. Finally, describe how positions will be created during the project period and sustained for at least 2 years after the end of the grant period. This should include the steps that will be taken to set up the project for success and position it for continued success after the end of the grant period. In the Barrier Reduction Support Services section of the business plan, worth 17 points, demonstrate that the project will provide support services to employees to help reduce personal and community barriers to economic security. Support services may include financial literacy services, childcare services, transportation, substance use disorder treatment, English language education, and job training. To do so, describe the needed types of social support services that will be provided through the CED project by the applicant or a project partner for newly hired individuals with low incomes. This may include childcare, financial empowerment support, transportation, job or life coaching, substance abuse treatment, access to housing, utilities, and food. Describe strategies in place for retaining individuals with low incomes in the newly created positions. And demonstrate a link between the support services that will be provided and the specific needs of the target populations to be served. Additionally, demonstrate the applicant or project partner has capacity and prior experience to successfully deliver these services. If project partners will be providing these services, ensure the application includes signed third-party agreements describing the support services to be provided, how and when they will be provided, and the role the partner organization will play in furthering the goals of the CED project. Agreements must be signed and dated by both the applicant and social service provider staff with signature authority. And lastly, Demonstrate that a staff member exists within the applicant organization or will be hired who has the ability, skills, and time to connect hired individuals with social supports and/or coordinate with social service providers to execute third-party agreements. The final section of the business plan is the community revitalization section of the business plan, worth 15 points. In this section, demonstrate an understanding of the broader community and its economic development needs and desires. Also demonstrate that the project will contribute to community revitalization that improves the lives of individuals currently living in the community. And demonstrate that the project will actively discourage the involuntary displacement of individuals currently living in the community. In the organizational capacity section, worth 10 points, provide information on your full project team to demonstrate that the organization, staff, and project partners have sufficient overall experience to carry out the project. Specifically, demonstrate that the organization, staff, and/or project partners have sufficient overall experience to carry out the project, and provide evidence of 2 business creation or business expansion projects undertaken by the applicant or project partner that have been executed within the past 10 years, are similar in terms of scope or scale to the project for which CED funding is being requested, were successful in creating sustainable full-time, full-year positions. Provide a quantitative and qualitative description of the jobs created through past business creation or expansion projects, including descriptions of the positions created, including information on wages and benefits, descriptions of how the jobs allowed employees to leave public assistance programs or similar supports, information on the long-term sustainability of the positions created. Include a resolution, meeting minutes, or other documentation that demonstrates that the Board of Directors has granted approval for the proposed project. Additionally, demonstrate that staff that will be responsible for maintaining oversight of each program activity, staff, and partners are identified, and procedures and policies used to oversee staff and/or partners or contractors are described. If you cannot demonstrate substantial experience with economic development projects similar to those proposed in the application, there is evidence of a viable partnership with a more experienced partner and signed agreements. To further demonstrate organization capacity, provide evidence that the identified staff have sufficient skills and experience in supervision, finance, and business development and management, and working with the target population to carry out the proposed project, and that key staff have the appropriate time commitment available to carry out the proposed project. Finally, ensure the application states clearly whether all key project staff positions are filled, including positions to be hired by third parties. In cases where a key staff person has not yet been hired, the application demonstrates that an appropriate position description, recruitment strategy, and estimated hiring timeline have been developed. The Letters of Support section demonstrates sufficient public support to successfully carry out the project. This section is worth 3 points. To demonstrate public support, include letters of support from local or regional government agencies or community organizations. The letters must identify the individual writing the letter, the organization they represent, the date, and reasons for supporting the proposed project. The next section of the NOFO we will discuss is the Project Budget and Budget Justification section, worth 10 points, that provides information on the line item budget and budget narrative to demonstrate that sufficient funds are available, that is, conditioned only on the receipt of this grant award, necessary to carry out the proposed project. To do so, demonstrate that planned expenditures are necessary, appropriate, and reasonable for the success of the project, and demonstrate that the amount of funds available for the project, CED and non-CED, is commensurate with the level of effort necessary to accomplish the activities, goals, and objectives of the project. And provide an itemization of sources and uses of funds for both CED and non-CED funding sources, if applicable, necessary to implement the project. Additionally, the budget must include funds for all required items, including travel for one staff member to attend a training and technical assistance conference in Washington, D.C., during at least 1 year of the grant. The budget justification in this section must do the following: clearly link the proposed expenditures to the proposed activities, demonstrate that each budget line item is appropriate, necessary, and reasonable for accomplishing the proposed project, and demonstrate the CED cost per position created is equal to or less than the ratio found by dividing the requested award amount by $32,000 for construction projects, or $27,000 for non-construction projects. For projects that involve non-CED funding to carry out the project, provide evidence that all capital requirements have been met through financing, cash resources, or in-kind contributions. Provide evidence in the form of signed commitment letters of binding commitments for loans, municipal, federal, or state tax credits, equity stock investments, or other supporting grants, or contributions totaling at least the amount of non-CED funds necessary. Demonstrate the ability to contribute any non-CED cash resources that are needed for the project, and that the applicant has pledged in support of the project, and provide evidence of in-kind contributions of personal property and a demonstration of how the value of those contributions was established through techniques such as an inventory valuation for equipment and/or a certified appraisal for real property. For projects with only CED funding, demonstrate your ability to carry out a successful project and accomplish your goals with only CED funds. And finally, for construction projects, demonstrate that the budget includes all construction costs and demonstrates that all costs are appropriately justified as reasonable and necessary to carry out the activities proposed in the application. The last elements we will discuss are the 3 opportunities for bonus points. The opportunities are project supporting domestic energy resources, worth 3 points. Project coordinating with existing public or private workforce development or job training programs, worth 3 points. Project located in a geographically underserved community, worth 4 points. Carefully review the NOFO for more information on what is required to demonstrate to receive these bonus points. Now, we will discuss the process for submitting your CED application, outlined in Step 5, Submit Your Application. Both first-time and repeat applicants are strongly encouraged to review this information well in advance of the application deadline, as OCS will not be able to extend the deadline. All applications must be received by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on the due date via grants.gov. Applications submitted after this deadline will not be reviewed. You must complete 3 registrations in order to submit a grant application. System for Award Management, or SAM, registration, updated annually. Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI, and grants.gov registration. Please note that the registration process for grants.gov can take up to 10 days. So all applicants are strongly encouraged to review this information well in advance of the application deadline. Applications submitted by an authorized organizational representative, or AOR, that does not have current registrations will be rejected by grants.gov. For detailed guidance on how to register and update registration for all 3 systems, please visit the Register and Get Ready resource available on the ACF website at the URL listed on this slide. Closely review the application checklist included in Step 5 to ensure all components of the application are included. If you experience a systems issue with grants.gov or sam.gov, please refer to ACF's policy for applicants experiencing federal systems issues. ACF may extend an application due date and receipt time when circumstances such as natural disasters occur, such as floods, hurricanes, etc., when there are widespread disruptions of mail service, or in other rare cases. The determination to extend or waive due date and receipt time requirements rests with ACF's Chief Grants Management Officer. Applications are required to be submitted electronically at www.grants.gov, unless the applicant has received an exemption in writing from the ACF Grants Officer. Details about how to obtain waivers are described in the NOFO under Step 5. If a waiver is granted, hard copy applications are due 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Refer to the funding announcement for the address to submit an application. Applicants submitting applications electronically do not need to provide additional copies of their application materials. Electronically submitted applications will be considered late and disqualified if the date or timestamp is after 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on the due date. Detailed instructions on submitting applications electronically are available on the grants.gov website. Finally, we will discuss what successful applicants can expect after grant awards are made, as outlined in Step 6. Learn what happens after award. There are important rules you will need to follow if you get an award. You must follow all terms and conditions in the Notice of Award. The rules listed in 45 CFR Part 75, Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for HHS awards. In effect at the time of award and any updates. The HHS Grants Policy Statement, or GPS. This document has terms and conditions tied to your award. If there are any exceptions to the GPS, they'll be listed in your Notice of Award. All federal statutes and regulations relevant to federal financial assistance, including those highlighted in HHS Administrative and National Policy Requirements. See also ACF Administrative and National Policy Requirements. 45 CFR, Part 87, Appendix A, Equal Treatment for Faith-Based Organizations. Fiscal Year 2024, the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act, 2024, PL 118-47. Prospective applicants should also note the important post-award requirements outlined in Step 6. Learn what happens after award. Recipients of funding under the CED program are required to submit performance progress and financial reports periodically throughout their project period. These forms include the Performance Progress Report, or the PPR, which is submitted semi-annually throughout the project to report on key outcomes, including businesses created and expanded, jobs created, and funds leveraged. It is submitted through the Grant Solutions Online Data Collection, or OLDC, system. Financial reports are also submitted semi-annually, and this is how recipients will report expenditures and federal transactions. Additionally, it is expected that, for all facility-related projects, the applicable OMB-approved SF 429 forms will be submitted along with supporting documents in the Grant Solutions OLDC system. Depending on the nature of the project, recipients may also be required to submit one or more additional forms. More information on what forms need to be submitted and when will be provided upon receiving the award. Several reference websites are included in the NOFO that may be of use in putting together an application. These websites are also listed on this slide. This concludes our presentation on the 2025 CED Notice of Funding Opportunity.